us on the map. Mr. Caruana leading the beat. Australia global rank 6. Feeling the heat like immortality.
All right, so in the next series, next video in this series, I should say, we are now looking at cancer, okay? Cancer, the great world unifier, okay? There is not a single person alive that likes cancer or a single country that is against cancer. And if one day we actually did come up with some pill or some sort of like, imagine that, an immunization that you could just have like injected once every 10 years and it completely eliminates the chance that you would get any sort of cancer. That would be amazing. So yeah, we're nowhere near it at this stage. So what is cancer? Cancer is simply the term given to the abnormal growth and multiplication of cells in your body, okay? And those cells become tumors, all right? Tumors themselves can be one of two things, benign or malignant. Benign tumors are localized, so there is an abnormal growth of cells, but they stop growing so they don't keep multiplying. They're non-threatening, and they can be removed easily via surgery. I say easily via surgery, but once they're cut out, they don't grow back, okay? So benign tumors, cut them out, gone, all right? The ones that we're mainly concerned about when we look at the health statistic for Australia are these malignant tumours, all right? So malignant tumours are cancerous growths that multiply and they keep growing and they impact on surrounding tissues and organs. Now, as they keep growing, okay, and multiplying and spreading, they then end up spreading into the bloodstream, at which point we call this process metastasis. So metastasis is when malignant growth of cells travels through the bloodstream and they can cause secondary growths in other parts of the body, okay? Or, and you know, like not worst case scenario, but quite badly, the lymph nodes, all right? So, you know, you may have seen a show before and someone on the show has been given a cancer diagnosis and then they're like, oh, and the cancer has spread, being malignant, to your lymph nodes or spread to your brain or spread to your heart, and that's metastasis, all right? So it's spreading throughout the body and going into other parts of the body. That's interesting because like a lot of the time, like I go and get skin checks once a year, and they don't just look at the parts that you expose to the sun, they look at your whole body, because what can happen is the part that's damaged that's causing malignant growth may not be showing, but if it travels through the bloodstream and then it can show up as like a mole or a spot somewhere else on your body, which you may never actually expose to the sun, but that is the part that they pick up. So, yeah. The last term that I want you guys to be familiar with is carcinogens. You've probably heard it before. It's probably trending on TikTok or something. But carcinogens are agents which can trigger cell mutations, all right? Known carcinogens are tobacco, UV radiation, asbestos, all right? Certain types of plastic which you heat up in the microwave, so like BPA, and now plastic containers need to be labelled as BPA free, for example, because that is a known carcinogen. So, I mean, exposing yourself to these things doesn't guarantee you're going to get cancer, but it's just one of those things that drastically increases the chance that you may get cancer. So that's our very, very brief crash course on what is cancer, and now we will go into the data. All right, so what does the data tell us about cancer in Australia? So both incidence, so that is the number of new cases diagnosed, and prevalence, the amount of total cases of cancer, they're both increasing, okay? Due to, I mean, that sounds really bad, but it's not, all right? Due to the growing and aging population, because we have more people living for longer, there's more chance, because as you get older, there's a greater chance of you getting cancer, all right? Due to the growing aging population, and also advancements in treatment to prolonging life, okay? So just because numbers of cancers being detected, which is an improvement in technology as well, is going up, it doesn't necessarily mean that numbers of cancers deaths are going up. In fact, they're going down, which we'll get to in a minute. An interesting statistic, 40% of all Australians will have been diagnosed by some sort of cancer by the time they hit 85, all right? So that's like, you know, 2 in every 5 Australians at some point in their lifetime between 0 and 85 will sit in front of the doctor and the doctor will say to them, you have cancer of the XYZ. Now that doesn't mean that it's all doom and gloom, okay? Because remember, a lot of them, as long as they are a lot of them can be easily removed, and therefore survival rates are, through the roof, especially for a couple of these. So it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to die from cancer, okay? But that is an interesting statistic. So our top rates of cancer for males, we've got prostate, skin, bowel, and lung. Females, exactly the same list, except you swap prostate for breast, okay? Prostate and breast cancer, though, currently have a survival rate of over 90%. So if you are diagnosed with prostate cancer or breast cancer, with the advancements in medical treatments, radiation therapy, surgery, etc., you have over 90% chance of actually beating cancer. And that's amazing, right? That is so good. Like the 5-year survival rate back in the 80s was like 50%. So basically you had 50% chance of surviving over 5 years when you got diagnosed with cancer, and now that rate is up over 70%. So survival rates are increasing and mortality is decreasing. Lung cancer, even though it's not the largest incidence and prevalence cancer, it is still the #1 killer of cancer, singular cancer, I should say. And as a reminder from the video we did on statistics, if you group all cancers together as one signal entity, the amount of deaths in Australia are actually higher than CVD or dementia. All right, so now we've got our risk and protective factors, and like last time, I'll do risk factors and then I'll do protective factors, which are pretty much the opposite things, but anyway. Risk factors, okay, lots of risk factors for cancer, and this is basically to say that all the bad things you can do are bad for cancer, and they can't really nail it as to one particular things. But obviously some things do shine through consistently in the data. Tobacco usage, okay, smoking and vaping hasn't really been, strong linked yet, because vaping is only new and cancer obviously takes a while. However, you can put 2 and 2 together and go, okay, well, if it's the tobacco that's going into the lungs which causes lung cancer, vaping is probably doing the same thing, all right? So for smoking and potentially vaping, there is an undeniable link to lung and mouth and throat cancer. So don't do it. UV exposure, melanoma, okay? Strong links there, right? Yes, people that don't smoke and vape do get lung cancer, and yes, people that don't go in the sun still get melanoma, but those statistics are extremely small compared to the people that do the bad things. Diet's low fiber, high in saturated and transaturated fats, to a degree red meat too, linked to colorectal or bowel cancer, okay? Overweight and obese, all right? So if you are overweight obese, you have an increased link to breast and bowel cancer. Alcohol usage, so if you're drinking too much alcohol, or maybe you're a frequent binge drinker, strong links to bowel, breast and liver cancers. Occupational hazards, so if you're working around asbestos, if you're working in highly polluted areas like the city, or if you're working using chemicals, okay, so think of all the people that use chemicals on a daily basis, linked to all cancer development, all right, but mainly lung cancer, specifically we've been talking about asbestos. Infections, all right, so if you get HPV, human papillomavirus, or you get any hepatitis B or C, strong links to developing cancer, and obviously in those cases we're mainly looking at reproductive organs. Non-modifiable risk factors, so these are things you can't control, and if you have these things, then you need to be more aware of modifiable ones. Family history and genetics, all right? So if someone in your family has had lung cancer, well, then you should probably not be smoking and vaping and working around asbestos and chemicals and stuff. Age, we know that the older you get, the more chances your cells have of growing abnormally. Gender, so once again, it's sort of like the First Nations argument we had. Just because you're a boy doesn't naturally make you more inclined to get cancer. It's the fact that you're a boy, and statistically in the data, boys don't go to doctors as often. Boys are generally the ones who are working with asbestos pollution and chemicals. Boys, usually smoke more. Boys usually spend more time in the sun, those types of things, okay? They're the things. But when you're looking just at numbers on a page, yes, males do have a higher rate than females. But that gap is closing, by the way. Interesting. Okay, so our protective factors, a lot of the time, they are opposites to our risk factors, but just to go through them. Avoiding tobacco usage, okay, so whether that's smoking, vaping, etc., but also that includes secondary smoking. So if your significant other or people in your household are smoking, encourage them to quit because it benefits your health. Or if you like to hang out on Friday and Saturday nights at pubs and clubs and whatever, don't hang out in the smoking area. Go to the non-smoking area, okay? We have designated smoking areas these days, which smokers can go to so that the non-smokers don't get cancer, all right? Think about it that way. It's not permission for the smokers to smoke. It's permission for the non-smokers to actually live a long and healthy life. Be sun safe, all right? If you are going to go out in the sun, slip, slop, slap, sleep, seek, slide. That's really tricky to say fast. Slip, slop, slap, seek, slide. There you go. Got it. Exercise regularly and eat a healthy diet to maintain a healthy body weight, because we know that overweight and obesity is linked to the development of all cancers. So if we can maintain a healthy body weight, it reduces our chance that we're going to get cancer. All right. Also, if you have less body mass, technically there's less cells for you to actually develop into cancer. Eat the rainbow. I've talked about this in a previous video, right? So fruits and vegetables, okay? Powerful antioxidants. Antioxidants reduce and clear out oxidative stress, which therefore reduces the load on the cells. And if the cells are happy and healthy, they're not going to grow abnormally. Partake in screening programs and regular checkups, all right? So national bowel cancer screening. I think everybody these days, or when you go to your GP over the age of 45, I think, you get a little like tube to go poop in and send it off, all right? Do that, don't be embarrassed, do it. Breast Screen Australia, you see the vans around the place all the time. Just pop in, have a check. Prostate checks, yes, it's a little bit awkward for males, but just go get it done, okay? Because the chances of survival, if you detect cancer when it's teeny tiny early, massive increase, okay? As opposed to getting it when it's too late. Because by the time it's too late, metastasis may have kicked in and now you no longer have breast cancer, you have breast cancer and lymph node cancer, and that's bad. And finally, I mentioned that if you get an infection like HPV and hepatitis, then there is a strong link to cancer there. Get vaccinated for HPV and hepatitis, right? If you get your vaccine, you're not going to get HPV and hepatitis, therefore you're not going to get cancers related to those things. So that's our risk and protective factors. We've got one more thing to go through in this video on cancer. All right, so our last section we're covering, for where and for whom is cancer changing in Australia, okay? So the first one is young adults. Now, when I say young adults, I mean people under the age of 40, all right? So I don't make the cut, that's it. I'm not a young, what am I now? A middle-aged man. So incidence rates for people that are under the age of 40 are increasing, okay? And that's, once again, maybe due to better technology in the detection of cancer. Maybe more people are actually being more health conscious and seeing their GPs. However, in saying all that, the survival rates for people under 40 who get diagnosed with cancer is excellent, all right? I think it's over 90%, it might even be over 95%, but very, very high. So once again, just being young in general, so your cells are generally gonna be a lot healthier most of the time, depending on your lifestyle. But most of the time, as you're younger, your cells are healthier compared to people that are older. That's why like little kids can just do anything, all right? And they just keep bouncing back, all right? Young cells are amazing. And they are doing a lot of research at the moment about how we can try and preserve cells in their youthness. So watch this space. But yeah, so survival rate's excellent, incidence going up. Females versus males, I mentioned this briefly before, but the rate of female diagnosis is increasing, especially with lung cancer, okay? And I wrote in brackets here, due to work culture, all right? So remember, cancers take a long time to develop. And 30, 40 years ago, it wasn't commonplace for females, like all the females in the households, to be working. A lot of them were stay-at-home mums or, that's just how the world was. Nowadays, it's very, very rare to have a house where a female stays at home. Most of them are working. And when you go to work, you start to pick up habits because everybody gets smoko, so you start taking smoko. So that's just one reason why, okay? May also be that a lot of people turn to smoking for stress relief, and you are more stressed when you are working as opposed to sitting at home, not doing much. So either way, smoking rates in females have gone up. Rates of female diagnosis of cancers, particularly lung cancer, has gone up, all right? Overall, male rates are still higher because if you look back at those risk factors, you got chemicals, smoking, sun exposure, etc. More males are still predominantly working in those areas, but the gap is narrowing, all right? So see, I feel positive about that being a male because I'm like, oh, the gap is narrowing, but there's still cancer and cancer sucks. Third one, we've got First Nations people. So this would be like the third time I've touched on this so far in this series, but 14% higher incidence rates of cancer diagnosis and 20% lower survival rates so once you've got cancer for treatment. Generally, this is due to later diagnosis, so not picking it up regularly because a lot of First Nations people that are included in the data don't regularly or don't live in metropolitan areas and go to the doctor regularly. There is culturally a higher usage of tobacco. And there are barriers to accessing healthcare, not only due to remoteness, but also culturally sensitive and appropriate healthcare, which we've talked about previously. And then finally, we've got our SES, so socioeconomic status. So we're talking about low socioeconomic status here, and people who live rurally and remotely, all right? So there's slightly higher incidence rates for people that have low socioeconomic status. So you may have low socioeconomic status and live metropolitanly, or you may live rurally and remotely and therefore be in the lower SES category. But while there's only a slightly higher incidence rate, there is a massive 40% higher mortality rate. So that's like 40% lower survival rate. And that's huge, okay? Obviously, the cost of treatments, et cetera, it can be very expensive. And that is playing a massive part here. And I made the statement in my rural and remote video, so the tyranny of distance. So as remoteness increases, the survival rates, particularly when we're looking at cancers, decreases. And that is going to end our sort of deep dive on cancer in Australia. Thanks.